Well, hello there. My name is Danny Wilson, and I am a Learning and Development Advisor with Pinnacle Financial Partners. I'd like to welcome you to our discussion today about a budget that works. It truly is the key to intentional spending. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Danny, I've had a budget before, and it didn't work. Well, if that's you, you're in good company. A lot of us have probably had situations in the past where we tried to get on a budget, and for one reason or another, it just didn't last. Well, hopefully what we're sharing with you today will help take care of that. And the reason it's so important is, yes, you'll know where your money's going, but we're all out there spending money left and right. And sometimes, if we're not careful, at the end of the month, we'll be like, where'd all my money go? So this is a way to be sure and spend money intentionally and on purpose with a plan. Now, we do recommend that before you make any major financial decisions, you always sit down with one of our financial advisors or some professional of your choice to look at your specific situation. Today, we're talking about some basic budgeting principles that should be helpful for pretty much anyone. Now, when we start talking about finding the money, some people get a little nervous because they don't want to pull back the veil, so to speak, and see really where their money's going. But that is the first step. We have to find where the money is now before we start getting out a budget sheet or whatever and trying to build a budget. Can't build a budget in a vacuum. Got to know where the money is now. So we've all seen a scary movie at one point in our life, probably. Some people like scary movies. And at some point in the scary movie, usually there's a long hallway with some creepy music in the background, or maybe some courtyard where somebody's going through a gate, and you're sitting there going, no, don't go there, because you know that that's where the bad guy is, right? That's where the guy with the chainsaw is. Don't do that. Well, I would encourage you, when it comes to finding where your money's currently going, think of it more like an Easter egg hunt. That's really what it's like. It's not a scary movie. It's like an Easter egg hunt. And who among us doesn't like a good Easter egg hunt, right? No one is ever disappointed when they find a bunch of eggs to put in their basket. That's really what we're doing here. Now, when we talk about calculating the income and expenses, one of the things I like to ask people, just to make a point, is how much money would it be per month if you had a $100 a week expense? I'll let you think about that for a second. $100 a week, how much would that be a month? Did you come up with $400? If you did, again, you're in great company. That's what most people say. However, we got to keep in mind that there's 4.3 weeks on average per month. If there were only 4 weeks, that would be 48 weeks in a year, but we know there's 52. And so one simple little thing like that can throw off our budget by a whole month's worth of income or expenses on an annual basis. So at the end of the year, if you have several $1,000s of credit card debt and you're like, I don't even know where that came from, the culprit could be something as simple as that. So always make sure you're calculating expenses and income earnings based on a 52-week year. And same thing if you get paid or have some kind of expenses every 2 weeks. There's 26 2-week periods in a year, not 24. And then, of course, if you're self-employed or have an income that's very much tied to commission, maybe it's commission only, your income's likely going to fluctuate a lot each month. Well, don't take the best month you ever had and try to create a budget based on that, right? The key there is going to be conservative. Take an average and be conservative so that when your income does fluctuate, you've still got enough to cover what it said, what you decided you wanted to cover in your budget. Gross income versus net, a lot of times we just look at the net deposit, and I get it. That's all that you really have to work with after all is said and done. However, the gross earnings, that really is what you make. And you do have at least some control over those things that come out. So if you look at your gross earnings and you start from there, then you can double check the amount of taxes that are coming out and see if you may need to adjust your W-4 form. Or you can take a look at the insurance coming out and make sure that those insurance premiums are going for the best plan available to you at that particular time within your household. Look at your 401k contributions. Make sure you're contributing. Make sure you allocate for the proper amount. And again, you have control over raising or lowering that. And you may have other things that come out of your gross pay, like a charitable contribution or something else. So you always want to start at the gross level. That way you're not missing anything. You'll also want to start gathering all of your statements, checkbook registers, bills, anything you have that comes to you through the mail or that you do from a record-keeping perspective so that you'll know where the money is going for those items. And something else that'll be extremely helpful is if you will carry a small notebook around with you for at least a month. And we're talking about the little notebooks you can get at the five and dime store. You can put them in your pocket. You can put them in your pocketbook, your purse, whatever. But every time you spend a penny, get that notebook out and write it down. And then at the end of the month, do some math. And I've never known anyone that wasn't at least a little bit surprised at how much money was going for things they didn't even think about. Or if they did, they had no idea they were spending that much on it. So going through that process will help you find your money. Then once you find it, you truly are ready to create the budget. And the first thing you'll want to do is make some adjustments. You may say, I didn't know I was spending $150 on coffee or the latte, and I don't want to do that anymore. I want to at least cut it down to $50 a month or $75 a month. Or you may be like, you know what? Yeah, that's a lot of money, but I want to keep doing it. At least you're now doing it on purpose. So make adjustments where you can to where your money's currently been going. And then also take the opportunity to plan for the future. There are things you know you're going to have to spend money on at some point in the future. Go ahead and start setting some money aside now for those items so that when it comes time to pay, you'll have the cash that you can use instead of having to reach for that credit card. And then if you're married, of course, you'll need to work with your spouse. Or if you're on a joint account for whatever reason, you'll need to work with that person to make sure that you communicate on how you want to spend the money that the two of you, the three of you share, whatever the situation may be. So work with that other person and make sure you're planning together. If two people, say in a marriage situation, are going opposite directions in terms of how they spend their money, you and I both know that's not going to work long term either. Got to work with your spouse, work with your partners. Give each dollar a name. This is crucial as well. You want to be sure and break down where your money is going into specific categories. Think of the grocery store that you like to buy your groceries at, and then ask yourself, okay, what are all of the things I can buy at that store that aren't food related? So depending on where you go, most all of them at least sell some over-the-counter medicine. They have a pharmacy there maybe. They might sell plants. They might sell outdoor furniture. Most all of them are going to sell toiletries, cleaning supplies, makeup, gift cards, all types of things. So it's not sufficient just to say, well, I spent $400 a month last month at the grocery store and put that in the grocery category. Got to break it down a little bit. So make sure whatever budget sheet or software you're using does that. Make sure it breaks things down into their specific categories so that you can more easily make adjustments and get a clear picture of where your money's going each and every month. And then you'll need to deal with irregular income. Again, a lot of us have some level of irregular income, maybe a bonus structure, maybe some sort of commission tied to a salary. But if you are straight commission or self-employed, then you're going to need to deal with irregular income. And if you're not careful, that's one of the things that can bust a budget. So here's something you can do. If your income fluctuates pretty much every month, then just take out a blank piece of paper and ask yourself this question. If I could only afford to pay for one thing this month, what would it be? And then write that down. Then ask yourself that question again. If I could only afford to pay for one more thing this month, what would that be? Write it down. And keep asking yourself that question over and over until you've written down everything you want to spend money on. What you'll find is the most important stuff is at the top of the list, or at least it should be, right? Things like mortgage, rent, food, gas, clothing, utilities, the electric bill, that type of thing. And so as money comes in, you just apply it towards your list. You start at the top and you pay it in that order. That way, at the end of the month, if you run out of money before you make it all the way down your list, at least you took care of the most important things. So that's a great activity for anyone, really, to sort of prioritize their spending. And then I've never met anybody, you might be the exception, but I've never met anybody that created the perfect budget that never needed to be touched again, right, the first time. So you're going to need to maintain the budget over time. One of the things that will be very helpful is to go ahead and plan for those variable and periodic expenses. Those are the expenses that you know are going to happen, but they just don't happen every week or maybe not even every month. So some of those examples might be car repair, or you need new tires, you need new brakes, you got to get an oil change. It could be home repair. The water heater goes out, your roof starts to leak. It could be things that are pretty much set in stone, but they're once a year or twice a year, like some sort of insurance maybe that you're paying twice a year. Go ahead and use the monthly average and start setting that money aside every month. And you may think, well, where am I supposed to put it? You have lots of options. One option would be to use what's called the envelope system, and some of you probably have heard of that. It's been around forever. That's where you get envelopes, or you could even use mason jars or something like that, something you can label. And when you decide how much you're going to set aside each paycheck or each month for those items, you just put that amount of money in that envelope, in that jar, and then when it comes time to spend some money in that category, you have what's available to you, right? If there's nothing in the envelope, you don't spend anything on that till you put more money in it. Another thing you can do, though, if you don't like to have a lot of cash laying around, is you can open a separate checking account. And what you'll do, instead of splitting that money up in different envelopes or jars or whatever, just make a lump sum deposit into that separate checking account every month for the total amount that you're putting to these other categories that are variable and periodic. And then get a notepad or a notebook, draw some columns, and just start splitting that money up every time you deposit to that checking account. Put $50 in the eating out category, $75 in the car repair category, whatever it is that you're setting money aside for. And so that notebook will tell you at a glance at any point during the year how much money you have in that account that's allocated for that particular category. It's an easy way to keep up with it without having, again, cash laying around in the house. But either way is fine. Those are some ideas that would be very helpful. And then you also want to be sure that somebody is balancing that checkbook. Somebody's acting as the accountant. So the idea is if more than one person is on an account and each person is just taking money in and out without communicating with the other person, that's going to be chaos. It's going to be really hard to know how much money you have at any particular time or what's available for expenses that come up. So figure out who's going to keep the checkbook, and then the other person can kind of communicate with whoever's taking care of that and let them know when they make withdrawals and give them receipts and that type of thing. That's going to be very helpful. You might find a space in your home that's just a repository for deposit receipts, and when you use a check card or write a check or whatever, just make a note and put that in the pile. Then the other person can kind of take care of that. Again, communication is key, and it's also important to understand how items process. You may go to the ATM machine, for example, and see that you have a $550 balance. So you think, oh, great, I'll take $300 out. And then tonight, something comes through, maybe a bunch of stuff comes through, and tomorrow you find that you're overdrawn. Well, how did that happen? Well, just know that you have automatic debits that you may have set up. Of course, if you set it up, you know that, but keep your eye on that day by day. When are they coming out? How much is it? What checks have I written that haven't cleared yet? And so on and so forth, because that will happen to the best of us if we're not thinking about what's about to clear before we start taking money out. Very important to stay on top of that. So these are the ideas that will help you create a budget that works. The first thing we got to do, we got to find the money. Have fun with that. That's an enjoyable thing. You can have lots of fun with that. Then once you find your money, you're ready to create the budget. And that can be a fun exercise too. Maintaining the budget over time, you'll have to deal with irregular income, but it is going to take some effort to maintain it. What you'll find, though, is that at first it may take a lot of time to figure this out, but over time, it's not like you're going to have a 2-hour weekly budget meeting, right? It gets easier. It becomes kind of second nature. And then it's like if you get that ball rolling, it doesn't take much to keep it rolling. It's much less effort over time as you kind of get in the routine of doing this. If you have any questions at all about what we've discussed today, I would encourage you to stop by your local Pinnacle office, talk with anyone there, talk with your financial advisor. We are here to help you in any way that we can. Thank you for your time.